Welcome back to Oryx to Zurich, the alphabetized journey through everyone's favourite galaxy far, far away. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter Besh, and today, Besh is for Beskar. Right now, the Star Wars hot topic is The Mandalorian. Season 2 finished late in 2020, and the Mando and his shiny Beskar armour is everywhere. So it seemed a bit of a no-brainer that the Besh episode should be about Beskar, the famous lightsaber-resistant material used to make his eye-catching armour. However, quick disclaimer here, I must warn you all that as this is an expanded universe / legends podcast, I will not be discussing the Mandalorian or his Beskar Gam specifically. I'll be looking into the history of the material and its uses throughout the expanded universe, not its most recent incarnation in the Disneyverse. If that's not your bag, then there are plenty of other fine podcasts out there who are covering the Disneyverse version, and they may be more to your liking. So, without further ado, I'm Rooney, this is Oryx to Zurich, and this is Beskar. Beskar is the Mandoa name for what is more commonly known as Mandalorian iron, Mandoa being the language spoken by the Mandalorians. And the only known source for it is the outer rim world of Mandalore and its moon, Concordia, making it a very rare substance, especially since the Mandalorians are not famed for their hospitality towards outsiders and strangers, so other species couldn't exactly drop in and set up their own mining operations. Well, not unless they wanted to get shot. Beskar was known for its incredible resilience and durability once smelted, with some sources citing it as one of the toughest metals known to the galaxy, capable of withstanding blunt force, repeated blaster fire, and even the blade of a lightsaber. This alone would have guaranteed its popularity, but the highly skilled Mandalorian metalsmiths, who were the only ones who really knew how to work the metal and jealously guarded their secrets, also enhanced the ore with things like carbons to create a modular cage-like structure, which reduced the weight whilst maintaining its legendary strength, and then blending it with other materials and alloys to allow its use in a variety of applications and configurations. It was commonly regarded as being indestructible, though that's not actually true, and that made it more highly prized for armour than contemporary substances such as plastoid and durasteel, and even more esoteric armour materials such as the saber-resistant but brittle cortosis. Due to being such a versatile metal, Beskar could be formed into solid plates, sheets, wire, mesh, micronized particles, and in some rare cases even a foam and a transparent film. This allowed Beskar to be used for almost anything, assuming of course you could find it, you could afford it, and you could find a metalsmith to actually forge it. As mentioned, Mandalorian metalsmiths were the only ones who possessed the intricate knowledge to work Beskar to its true potential, and they very closely guarded that knowledge, passing it from one generation to the next, exclusively within the Mandalorian community. These secrets were what allowed them to fashion the most powerful armour, almost to order in some cases, as they knew the exact methods to enhance desired properties of the Beskar they worked, allowing it to be customised for weapons, personal armour, shipplating, construction materials, and in some extreme cases even things like dinnerware and cutlery. With a proper application of reagents during smelting, they could even change the colour of the finished material, almost to order for the client. In a notable departure from what is portrayed on screen in The Mandalorian, striking two pieces of Beskar together will not produce a clear resonating note like we see on screen, but a dull clanking noise instead, due to the very dense nature of the metal. In fact, what we see on screen is more like the sound produced by striking two pieces of refined durasteel together, that kind of resonating ting sort of sound, almost like a tuning fork. So, we've discussed how great Beskar is, and alluded to some of its uses, but now we're going to take a look at some more specific examples of things that it's been used for throughout its history. Beskar Gam. Probably the most famous use of Beskar is in the forging of the iconic Beskar Gam, translation, iron skin in basic, or Mandalorian armour, and its accompanying boucher. which is the helmet, as seen on both Jango and Boba Fett, though their armour was actually Durasteel, not Beskar, and Cal Skirata, who boasted that his armour was real Beskar with only 2% ceridium, meaning it didn't have the carbon cage structure previously discussed to lighten it, and was probably very heavy. Something of a point of pride with Cal was the fact that it was heavy. The exact configuration of the armour, number of plates, specifics of the shapes, the colour, the placing of the shapes on the body, were left to the individual wearing it, and suits were often painted according to the wearer's beliefs or current goal in life, so, vengeance, justice, all that sort of thing. And suits were often passed down from one generation to the next, so, someone would die, their suit would then be taken in by their clan, and then sort of given to a new foundling or like a child who had come of age. The Beskar, which is a traditional Mandalorian sabre, usually consisting of a single-edged blade with a sharp point and a leather-wrapped hilt, and based on the design of ancient Tong sabres, Tong obviously being the race who effectively created the Mandalorian culture. They were forged from folded Beskar to increase their strength even further, and due to the fact that they were generally made from pure Beskar, they were very heavy for a one-handed melee weapon, and capable of delivering heavy blows with each strike, single-handed. Kaival Dar member, Waylon Val, was known to use one of these on occasion. At the very least, he took it with him when he went on missions. The Besbev. It's a traditional Mandalorian flute, and a perfect representation of Mandalorian culture. Unlike flutes seen elsewhere in the galaxy, the Besbev was intended to not only be a musical instrument, but also a weapon of war. As such, one end of the flute tapered to a sharp point, almost like a leaf-like blade or a writing quill, and could be used as a stabbing weapon, which was something they excelled at when bleeding out your stabbed target due to the fact that it's a hollow flute and it basically acted like a spout for all the blood in the being's body. Being made of pure Beskar, it was also fairly heavy, allowing it to be used as a club as well, so what you couldn't stab you could just beat to death instead. Crush gaunts, one of my personal favourites. Now, these were an armoured glove made of a reactive fabric infused with micronized Beskar, and often reinforced with solid plates or spikes of the same. The fabric enhanced the natural strength in the wearer's grip to the point where crushing bone, metals and other weaker armours was really easy, and thus giving the device its name. Now, due to the reactive fabric being infused with the micronized Beskar, it also gave the user the rather unique ability to catch a lightsaber blade, assuming they had the speed and dexterity to actually catch this whirling blade of heated plasma. They were also eventually outlawed sometime around 250 BBY, though they did make a limited comeback during the Yuuzhan Vong War, as the Mandalorians saw every advantage over the invading aliens. Darth Vader himself was rumoured to have an ancient Sith-modified crush gaunt integrated as part of his armour in his right hand, though at this point that remains unsubstantiated rumours, though a very interesting one. The Basulik Fighter was designed by Mandal Motors after the end of the Yuuzhan Vong War, and it was intended to be a multi-role starfighter using cutting-edge technology. It entered into service with the Mandalorians around 40 ABY at the start of the Second Galactic Civil War, and featured a micronized film of Beskar over its entire hull, meaning that most conventional attacks simply bounced right off. This made the Basulik, which was named in honour of the ancient basilisk war droids of Mandalore's past, an incredibly tough ship that was able to contend with much larger, traditionally more powerful ships, or larger groups of smaller ships than would be expected from a ship of its size. This next one is a rare one, lightsaber hilts. Lightsaber hilts. On very rare occasions, given the animosity between Mandalorians and Jedi, lightsaber hilts could be constructed from Beskar, making the hilts resistant to the blades of other lightsabers and effectively making them immune to the lightsaber mark of contact known as Sun Gem, which is disarming your opponent by disabling or destroying their lightsaber. The Dark Lady of the Sith, Lumia, made the hilt and some sections of her light whip out of Beskar sometime around 4 ABY. So, now we've covered some of the uses and the basics of what Beskar is, we have a little bit of a history lesson. The Tong, the ancient progenitors of the Mandalorian culture, were allegedly drawn to what would become the Mandalore sector by tales of the indestructible iron that could be found there, sometime after being driven from Coruscant. They came to the uninhabited world that would be Mandalore around 7000 BBY and claimed it as their own, slaying the huge mythosaurs that dominated the world in the process. That was when they discovered the source of this astounding metal and set to work forging it. It was the discovery and the subsequent use of Beskar by the Tong that saw the boundaries of the Mandalore sector expand as they equipped themselves with it and pushed out from their new homeworld and claimed nearby planets. Realising how precious and rare this new Mandalorian iron was, and how difficult it was to work with without the proper knowledge, they began to protect it and the secrets to forging it from outsiders. However, its remarkable powers inevitably attracted attention from other races in the galaxy, making it one of the most valuable substances on the galactic market, and Mandalorian smiths scarcely less so. But attempts to purchase the skills of the metalsmiths were usually rebuffed, and all other attempts to refine and forge Beskar gave poor and unreliable results. By the time of the Cold War between the Galactic Republic and the Sith Empire, which began in 3653 BBY with the signing of the Treaty of Coruscant, the Mandalorians held that Beskar was the best material for crafting their armour, especially given the protection it provided against lightsaber-wielding Force users from either side, who seemed to be everywhere during that Cold War. During their alliance with the Sith Empire, several Sith made use of Beskar for more esoteric functions, such as Lord Odeon commissioning a throne of it for his flagship, whilst Darth Revan, not to be confused with Darth Revan, had the floor of his training room made from it, though thinking about it, this was probably a laminate given the amount that would be needed to cover the floor of what basically amounted to an entire gymnasium. Also around this time, some Sith warriors were able to commission armour parts from the Mandalorians and incorporated them into their combat garb for the obvious advantages that would give them. Now in time, Mandalorian iron became a profitable export for Mandalore, securing them their place in the galactic market, albeit a very niche one since Beskar was almost useless without a Mandalorian smith to forge it. After the Republic became the Galactic Empire, they opened negotiations to establish a garrison and mining operations on Mandalore. Now, Mandalore was reluctant to refuse outright, because that was an act that would have caused the Empire to simply invade in a costly but ultimately victorious reprisal. So Mandal Motors and the various clan heads agreed to the base and accepted a payment of 800 million credits for exclusive mining rights to the Torkrush region. They also were employed to refurbish and upgrade prison ships with Beskar cells and provide specialist security equipment, such as security doors, whole new cells and manacles, all made of Beskar, which hinted rather strongly at the Empire's purge of the Jedi and the preparations they were making for dealing with Jedi prisoners. After the Imperial garrison had soured relations on the planet far enough, the Empire took the next logical step and occupied Mandalore, enslaving large portions of its population and forcing them to work in the large strip mines it established across the planet. Large amounts of Beskar from the shallow veins across the planet were shipped off-world for use elsewhere, right up until 3 ABY, when Fen Shaisa and his reformed Mandalorian protectors led the insurrection, which drove the Imperials off Mandalore and then eventually out of Mandalorian space entirely, securing their freedom. Decades later, around 40 BBY, a large vein of Beskar was discovered on Mandalore in the wake of the Yuuzhan Vong's failed galactic invasion and their devastating attack on Mandalore in 29 BBY. A slight aside here, but it's worth mentioning the Battle of Mandalore as it came to be known. During the Yuuzhan Vong's invasion, Boba Fett, acting in his role as Mandalore at the time, officially allied the Mandalorians with the invaders in exchange for Mandalorian space being left alone. Secretly, he and the rest of the Mandalorians were acting as spies and saboteurs, relaying critical information back to the New Republic. When the Vong discovered this and were understandably not happy, they launched a huge attack on Mandalore, bombarding the planet and landing troops in their thousands. But Mandalorians being Mandalorians, they fought them off, eventually defeating the invaders and becoming the only people in the galaxy to defeat the Yuzhang Vong unaided. Basically, everyone else had allied together to fight the Vong. The Mandalorians were out there on their own planet, on their own, and they were the only people who fought them off without any kind of support from anybody else, which, a Mando's got to do what a Mando's got to do. It was in the wake of this huge battle, in the rebuilding, that they discovered a large vein of Beskar that had been uncovered by the aliens' bombardment weapons. That vein of Beskar led to an economic resurgence for the battered and weakened Mandalore sector, and Fett ordered that the vein, which fortunately happened to be on unclaimed land, be used as a resource for all of Mandalore, with part of it to be used in the manufacture of goods for sale and export, and the rest of it to be used for the Mandalorians' own needs, including the reconstruction and defense purposes. Now, years later, towards the end of the Second Galactic Civil War, it was revealed by Imperial Admiral Natasi Dala that she knew where much of the Beskar shipped off of Mandalore during the occupation had gone, and would arrange for it to be returned to them in thanks for Fett and the Mandalorians' help in the preceding Civil War. That pretty much takes us up to date as far as Beskar is mentioned in the expanded universe, and we're not likely to get any more since the expanded universe is more or less dead now. Disney has shown no interest in expanding it, although there are rumours that they are going to start reprinting some of the stuff under the Legends banner, which will be interesting. Now we're going to hop over the fence into the real world. And over here in the real world, Mandalorian iron was first mentioned in Tales of the Jedi 5, The Saga of Nomi Sunrider Part 3, a title which just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It was a comic published by Dark Horse back in 1994. In it, the iron took the form of Mandalorian manacles, but little was said about them. It was first properly introduced into Star Wars canon later that year in the Tales of the Jedi, the Freedon Nad Uprising story arc. Another just really catchy title there, guys. Which that introduced Mandalorian iron's lightsaber-resistant qualities. In it, the door to Nad's tomb was made of Mandalorian iron, which prevented the Dark Jedi Exar Kun from simply cutting his way in there as he planned, much to his surprise and no doubt consternation. Now, with the publication of one of my favourite book series, Republic Commando, by Karen Traviss, who's actually one of my favourite authors, despite her being a bit of a right-wing nutter in real life, and then the tie-in article, The Mandalorians, People and Culture, also written by Karen Traviss, Mandalorian iron got its Mandoa name of Beskar, because Traviss basically created the language of Mandoa for her books and the article, and created this whole culture for the Mandalorians, which has, in my not-so-humble opinion, never been bettered, and to be honest, I doubt it ever will. For anyone going to look it up, it's issue 86 of Star Wars Insider, which has the article in it. So, in conclusion, that was Beskar. Now, this one touched on a lot of interesting stuff from the expanded universe, so I'm really hoping it's whetted a few appetites out there in listener land, and that some of you will go out and check out some of the awesome stuff that created this history for everyone's favourite fictional metal. So until next time, may the Force always be with you.